Yes, so for the benefit of our viewers, we've decided, and hopefully not just for the benefit of our normal viewers, but our regular viewers, but for everybody. There was an interview on 7:02 on Friday morning. It was the 22nd of July. Bongani interviewed an attorney, Dominic, around syndicates hijacking properties. So basically the story and the way the interview ran was a perception was created that it happens quite easily for syndicates to move into a property. So you go out on holiday, you go away for the weekend, or basically, you know, instead of using Checkers 60, you hop out quickly to go to the grocery store. You come back and these people are just moving into your house. And the conversation centered around then by the Prevention of Illegal Evictions Act becomes applicable. And it's almost not impossible, but the time period that was referred to in the interview was 15 months, 15 months, to get that eviction done. And people were freaking out. Quite honestly, I heard about the interview Friday morning already. And by Monday morning, I started seeing that interview being posted and shared across WhatsApp groups all across the country. My poor estate agents that I work with closely, I started getting quite a few calls from them. I already answered all the estate agents that I work with to tell them, no, guys, remember, it's one thing and it's amazing to explain the law and say, oh, this is a potential risk. And I don't personally know Dominic Steyn, and I'm not critiquing him per se. You know, each attorney is entitled to conduct an interview as they see fit. I am just very concerned about the effect this has on property investors, because the truth is, and this is why we've decided to have this conversation, what does it really look like? What are the chances of this happening? And if it does happen, what can we do? Now, before we miss the actual answer, I'll give the short answer and then we'll discuss it in a lot more details. Something that was omitted from the interview, and it had a very scary effect, and fear-mongering tends to run quicker than positive news. So if we can, by any chance, get this true message out more than the fear-mongering element, there is another remedy that wasn't discussed at all, and that's the mandement van spoeling. If you do go to Checkers and you didn't use Checkers 60, or you come back from holiday and people are in your property, we bring an urgent application and bring the mandement van spoeling, and we'll be in court the same evening, maybe in the morning, like worst case scenario. Yeah, it's not true that you have to sit between trespassing and buy, and Bruno, I'll pass that ball to you to do that in a lot more detail. The interview centered around, if it passed the time period of trespassing, then it has to be an eviction in terms of buy, and that's not true. You've been spoliated, so you've been deprived of the possession of your premises. You can be in court like in seriously the same day, and you will get the order, but your remedy is then the mandement van spoeling, which is a Dutch term. We've talked about that a lot of times here. When an owner disconnects utility suppliers or lockout or whatever, then the tenant would be successful with the mandement van spoeling, where in this context, the landlord or the tenant, if there's other people moving into your place, you can most definitely approach a court on a very urgent basis, and you will be successful unless there's something funny. So the truth is, if you don't look at the mandement van spoeling, and I can't fault the legal argument in the interview, it's just the omission of the very glaring big solution to the problem wasn't addressed. So please, guys, don't freak out at all. Property investors, don't sell your investment properties. Even the attorney in the interview said, if you use the correct attorneys, an eviction shouldn't be a problem. Now, the answer is, this is why firms like SSLR and BSA exists. We specialize in evictions, and it's not a difficult thing. It's definitely not a 15-month thing for us, not a 15-minute thing, but 15 hours we should be in court. So it's don't freak out because of that interview, please, guys. Something very obvious was missed. Bruno, I think I sort of framed framed the conversation for us just to get out the problem and a quick answer. But if you can maybe just start off the conversation by let's just quickly talk about how many times we see that. I mean, as eviction specialist firms with a national presence, both our firms, have you ever in your life experienced a situation where this happened, where somebody, you know, went on holiday, they came back with people living in their property? I honestly, in the 14 years that SSLR does this for a living, and we do a load of evictions, I have never encountered a situation like this. I've encountered squatting on vacant land, definitely, that's happened. I've never, ever experienced this. And I mean, I see the one half of the estate agents of the country, you see a chunk on the other half, and then a lot of property investors. So if I haven't seen this, I'm curious to know whether you've seen it in real life.
No, so look, the first question comes down to frequency. And I think this goes exactly to the point that you were making is, I heard that interview, and like I mentioned to you in the conversation, everything was addressed. But it's like if a client had come to me and I want to play the good side of the card, I can say many things that aren't untruthful. I mean, I've managed to get an eviction, for example, in 6 weeks. But this was when it wasn't COVID, and at that specific court, the dates were accessible and things went perfectly, right? That's not happening anymore. So I can tell the client, oh yeah, no, well, I've done it in 6 weeks. Is that a fact? Yes, it is. The problem is that people need to understand, and that's why with clients, I do manage their expectations. I do tell them the worst case as well. There have been evictions that have been 15 months. He's not wrong. It's not to say that, oh, 15 months, where did he get that from? That's ludicrous. I've had evictions that have lasted for years, but different circumstances. Those evictions, a lot of the clients actually knew that they were going to last longer. Some of the budgets were put in place because we understood the fight that we had in our hands. And unfortunately, some of them, there was nothing we could do. Remember, there's things like appeal processes. An attorney at the beginning of a conversation can't tell you whether the opponent's going to appeal it or not. We don't know that. We can say that if they do, there's going to be an additional period of time that's going to be added on, and there's going to be additional cost. And yes, that's where your 15 months start coming in. Hell, 24 months might start coming in. But what we do need to kind of understand as an industry is that there's a mean behind everything, right? Do all our evictions take 15 months? No. Do all our evictions take 6 weeks? No, right? There's a middle ground, and sometimes you actually tend to find that it leans in a certain direction, so it's weighted. And the weight that we're noticing in the industry is that when I keep telling people this, there's different categories of tenants that we need to understand. So you have your normal tenants that sign lease agreements, that's weighted in one way. Then you have squatters as an example. So sorry, then you have people whose houses were foreclosed. They deal with property in a different way. And then you've got squatters. So these are people that have no housing at all, and they're desperate to find housing, and they find an empty piece of land or an abandoned building, and they run in there and they just need a roof over their heads. That's another category. And then the last category is the actual hijacking, which are guys that are doing this as a criminal element. Each one of these are weighted differently, right? Now, to Silna's point, underlying most of these, if someone on the hijacking side, so if squatters were to move into your property overnight, or if it was a hijacker through criminal intent, goes into the property overnight, the spoliation application is available, right? So is the Trespass Act. So now you've got already two methods that can deal with the problem instantly. The criticism on the Trespass Act, which is why I think Dominic didn't mention it, but if you look at some of the other hype or snowball effect, like Debbie had a show where she spoke about a building hijacker. The problem that you might find is that the police don't act in terms of the Trespass Act as well or as much as they should. So our reliance on the police force, unfortunately, creates that element of, sure, yeah, we don't have recourse, but the spoliation application is recourse. Now, there's a fine line, and I think this is something that merits discussion. There's a fine line between when you can do a spoliation and when a person is deemed to have taken occupation of the property. And this was a conversation or a debate that we recently had over some evictions in Cape Town, or evictions in Cape Town, some forceful removals, because it was a question of if the people land on the property, but they haven't established themselves as residing on the property, a spoliation or counter spoliation in that case would be permissible. Now, the only thing with the counter spoliation, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So you've got a spoliation application, which is you go to court, you get a court order, you immediately remove or take back possession of something that's been taken away from you. There's an argument to say that counter spoliation, those circumstances would also be allowed. So as an example, if I've got a pen in my hand and someone takes it and I just take it back, it's okay. The law does allow for me to be able to quickly react, right? So for example, if 5 people are outside your property and they push the door open and the one guy gets in, there's nothing wrong with you locking the door and keeping the other 4 out. It's not like, oh, now he's in possession, I need to go to court, right? So there is an element of fairness when it comes to, it's not taking the law into your own hands, it's quick reaction, counter spoliation. So anything done very quickly would still be permissible. Now, my argument is that a spoliation application, they would really need to be residing there for the purpose for PI to apply. A spoliation application done within the first couple of days would still be permissible, I feel, and we've done it before many, many times, and the courts have granted it. Now, yes, there is a line between, so for example, the one worry is when a hijacker puts in a tenant, and the tenant thinks that they're living there, and now they've been there for a year. So there has been a case, as an example, where the guy was overseas for a year, and there were people staying on the property, and they basically started living there. Now, you can't come back after a year and go, oh, spoliation, you took away possession, because these people have established themselves. And so people just need to understand it's not as clear cut as, no, you know what, you have a house, they break in, it's done. Like there's nothing we can do. It's really more if it were to happen to you, number one, realize the odds are slim. And that's what the interview didn't say. So what are the odds of it happening to you? If someone hasn't experienced it, I've only experienced squatters in abandoned buildings. Or farms where they move in and they're living on the other side of the farm, they break through a fence or something like that. So the odds of it happening in suburban areas, as an example, is very slim. So understand that as property investors. In inner city buildings, yes, slightly higher. Come on, you property investors, think about it. If you're playing the game of investing, understand the game. So if you're going to get in CBD, guess what? Get the right service providers. Because there's guys out there that do secure the buildings, that manage the buildings, that don't let that happen. I've got amazing property investors in your Yeovil, in Hillbrow. I work with TUP that finances these buildings. You don't get hijacked just like this. It's a process. First, there's angry tenants. Then these tenants invite people over. Then these people start. It's a process. It's not often, and it's also when the landlord isn't as engaging. The people buying in these areas need to know how to deal with their tenants. And so number one, the odds are slim, right? Number two, if it were to happen to you, in this very small chance, there is recourse if you move quick enough. And I think that's the crucial point for people to know. Just stay in control. And I think that's kind of the message I want to hit home is this has been happening for years. The snowball isn't anything new. We've been doing this for 10 years now. The hijacking is not a new thing. So just like, don't worry about the hype right now. Let's deal with it. I've got no issue with saying, let's find a solution, but we should have been doing this for the last 10 years. So I'm glad people are now awake, but yeah, don't panic either.
I agree with you, Bruno, and I think just to drive your point home a little more, the acting quick thing is also when it comes to your knowledge, not a year later. If you have a property and you're never there and you don't have somebody watching it, the least of your problems is actually random people squatting in your property. Your bigger problem is probably something more around maintenance. What happens if the geese burst or there's a leak in a water system, whatever? I mean, a million things happen to a property if you're not there. So if you're at your property, you should probably not have a problem with this. If you have an investment property, make sure that you know what's happening there and have somebody, to Bruno's point, constantly managing the thing. You can't, a property is not like buying shares and just letting it sit. It's an active investment. If you're not keen on being actively involved in your investment, property investment might not be the right thing. But if you have the time, and most of our clients, Bruno, I think you and I have very obviously similar clients, they are very closely involved with the properties. They know exactly what's happening. And that is the type of landlord on a buy-to-let type of investment or flips. You must be extremely actively involved in the property. If you buy a property to flip and you leave him open and vacant for 6 months while you are still trying to figure out which color paint you're going to use, your chances of having a squatter in that property soon is high, depending on the area, but still think about these things, be actively involved in your investment. But the chances, guys, seriously, of you going on holiday, returning to people living in your property, and then you struggle with an eviction, slim to none. I'm dead serious. And we do a lot of these. So when we say that, we don't say it to calm the industry, we say it to calm the industry with facts. That's really true. The thing is, if you do go on holiday, say you overseas for 3 weeks, you didn't ask the neighbor to keep an eye on the property because you didn't think it's necessary. You get back and my goodness, you have people over for a braai you didn't invite. You will be successful with a spoliation application, even though some time passed now. But be aware of that. And if you go away on holiday, there are people that will keep a quick eye on the situation. So make sure you do what you have to do. But please, guys, don't live in fear. I think the past 3 or so years, fear has been the driving factor behind everything. I mean, at this stage, we're so over disease fear that we all just like, whatever about monkeypox, because we're exhausted in fear, but our nerves are wide open and sensitive when it comes to fear. So I'm a big believer in the facts will always calm the situation down. So get the right facts. Yes.